So I want to talk about the passing of Scott Hall yesterday. I was going to do a video yesterday in the evening when it happened, but I just really couldn't. And so I'm doing the video today. I want to discuss the passing of Scott Hall, known as Razor Ramon. There's a lot of very strong history as far as this man in the professional wrestling game, but also there's history between like what he did on television and like me and my own personal memories of Scott Hall. So Scott Hall, I first discovered him as Razor Ramon, although I found out, like, I didn't put two and two together that he was the Diamond Stud right away. Well, when I was a kid, I first discovered Razor Ramon. And he was a character that was meant to portray this over-the-top Cuban, sort of like, Al Pacino in Scarface, Tony Montana, He had an accent, had a lot of the same lines from that movie, and he was portrayed by Scott Hall. Now, Razor was one of the most popular guys in the WWF in the early to mid-90s. At first, he was a heel. But once he went babyface in 93, he really and rather quickly became the number 3 or number 2 babyface in the company at the time. Very charismatic, tremendous amounts of charisma. He was a good in-ring worker. Everyone talks about the WrestleMania 10 ladder match, and that's great. It is a first of its kind for pay-per-view WWF, but he had so many other great matches, including, in my opinion, the second Shawn and Razor ladder match at SummerSlam 95 that nobody ever talks about, but it was, in my opinion, a little bit better than the WrestleMania one. It could be because maybe I've seen the WrestleMania one so much and it's been so overhyped. And it's a great match, don't get me wrong, but the SummerSlam match, I feel like, is criminally underrated. When I first found Razor Ramon, he was billed as being from Miami, Florida, because, that's where Cubans are at. And me being of Cuban heritage, I believed it. And not only did I believe it, but my dad believed it too. We knew the business was a work, but my dad, who was raised and born in Cuba, and lived there most of his life, he legit and genuinely thought that Scott Hall was a Cuban man, that Razor Ramon was really Cuban. Besides the fact that Ramon is his father's name, my grandfather, and the fact that my dad also had 7 or 8 gold chains he would wear at one time in his life till we went broke and then he sold them all. There was a time when he would have a bunch. I've seen him do it with a bunch of chains. He believed. I mean, Razor definitely did his homework to a degree, and I say to a degree because a lot of it was from Scarface, but he definitely did some homework to portray the character of Razor Ramon. And the dude was mega popular. I mean, I remember the feud with Diesel in 94 and with Shawn Michaels. I remember the Dean Douglas feud shortly after that. The Jeff Jarrett feud after that. I remember the feud he had with Goldust, which would be his last feud in the company, and was supposed to lead to a Miami parking lot brawl at the WrestleMania 12, but they pulled him from the match and instead put Piper in there because they said he failed a drug test, even though he believed for many years it was because he had said he was going to go to WCW. And then when he did go to WCW, he was the first man we saw on TV to begin the NWO. And it was interesting because I vividly remember the day after Memorial Day, or maybe it was Memorial Day, 1996, I'm watching Nitro. I saw this thing live. Mike Enos is wrestling, I forget who. It was the Mauler, I think Steve Dobbs, I forget. And Razor Ramon comes down the aisle and gets in the ring, cuts that famous promo, you want a war? You got it, which was legendary. I got goosebumps right now thinking about it. And the fact that he would pop up on the show, they wouldn't say his name, they wouldn't call him anything. He didn't actually get called Hall until way later. And people genuinely thought that the WWF was invading. I know I did. I called up my friend Sergio at the time and I was like, dude, WWF is invading WCW. What the hell's going on? And my dad thought it was like a deal they made. He's like, oh, Scott Hall, Kevin, or Razor and Diesel, they just made a deal. Like WWF and WCW made a deal to work together. which was unheard of back then. Turns out that wasn't true. But I remember a friend of mine told me that they were going to WCW maybe a month before that, and I had forgotten that until I remembered, but it still didn't click in my head. And let me tell you, man, I have a VHS copy of that Great American Bash when Kevin Nash powerbombed Bischoff through the table, and I have still in my possession a VHS copy of Bash at the Beach from the pay-per-view when Hulk Hogan first was revealed as being the third man. Wrestling will never be like that again. It'll just never hit those heights again. And then I remember Scott Hall, being Kevin Nash's partner in The Outsiders. And then I remember him having the angle where they took his real life problems, like his alcoholism problems he had, and they turned it into an angle on TV. And that was in '98 they did that. And it also reminds me of when they had that was building up to a match at Halloween Havoc. I was going to get to that here between Kevin Nash versus Scott Hall, where Nash just destroyed him with power bombs, then walked out because it wasn't about winning a match to him. It was about knocking some sense to his friend. And that would, of course, lead to him using the cattle prod to cattle prod Goldberg at Starrcade, and then he got power bombed by Kevin Nash, and we had the Goldberg streak broken, and Nash became the WCW World Champion. And it's like, these are some crazy memories. These are some crazy, crazy memories, yo. And then I remember when they came back to WWF, the NWO. And I remember Scott Hall had that match with Steve Austin at WrestleMania, which I thought was a step down for Austin, but, he respected Scott Hall as a great worker. And then after that, I remember him being in TNA. I remember him doing a lot of other stuff, and I watched him, dude. Everybody knows Scott Hall. We talk about his shoot interviews on my podcast, the K-Fabulous Lucha Brothers Wrestling Show. We talk about how much we love this man. We even put him in our Hall of Fame. We love Scott Hall. And when I found out that he had 3 simultaneous heart attacks, I'm like, okay, well, he might still pull through, but 3 heart attacks is tough. What happened was, from what I understand, he hurt his hip, he had hip surgery, and there was a blood clot, and that's what led to this. And, yesterday his family took him off life support, which at that point when they take you off life support, it's like they're basically saying you're gone. Like, it's up for a miracle to happen. He wound up passing away. The entire clique, Shawn Michaels, Triple H, Sean Waltman, Kevin Nash, these guys are probably completely just distraught by this. The fans are for sure. But we know for a fact that these guys were really close friends, especially Kevin and Scott, and Waltman, the Kid and Scott. And even though they may have ran roughshod over the WWF in the mid-90s, Scott Hall always worked hard, always tried his best to put somebody else over and make them look good when he was able to do so. Always tried to have good matches. Very unique style. Very different style from other guys. He was a different guy than Bret Hart. He was a different guy than Shawn Michaels. He wasn't that kind of athlete. But he definitely had great cardio, and he definitely had great matches with the size. Later on, I was able to discover him in the AWA when he was Magnum Scott Hall. Because Magnum TA had taken off so much, so they made him a Magnum from Magnum PI. And he was green as grass, but he got better. And he's also, from what we understand, he's also kind of a genius in the business. I mean, he's the guy who came up with the Crow gimmick for Sting. You want to be Taker, just be Taker. And it was his idea to come up with the Crow gimmick for Sting. That's fantastic. I mean, this guy gave a lot to the business. And wrestling fans all over the world are mourning, including me, because I never got to meet him. But Elise Bowman was kind enough to get me an autograph 8x10 from him and Nash at a convention they did a couple years ago, so that was very kind of her. I just never got to meet the guy. You know what I mean? There's even a talk show where I think it might have actually been Jerry Springer, where Scott Hall appeared and gave a kid free tickets to WrestleMania. He wouldn't even work WrestleMania, but like the kid was like a special needs kid or something like that. He appeared and did that, and that's very touching. Very just, it's a bummer, man. And Scott himself, I mean, this dude, he has checkered past. He admitted it. He had problems, personal problems. he once murdered somebody. I mean, he talked about that on ESPN years ago. Like, this dude has had it rough, very rough life, but I mean, I'm sure that I know he did a lot of, introspection on that. Obviously, when he killed the guy, it was supposed to be a self-defense thing, so it wasn't like he tried to kill the guy. Just to clarify for those who don't know, stories out there. But I do wish the best for his family and send my condolences. He will never be forgotten because here's a guy who legitimately made history, not just as Razor Ramon, but also as Scott Hall. In founding the NWO and changing the business forever. What more can be said?